Sometimes I feel like I want to fly without no wings.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sober Cold Bear podcast. I am honored and grateful to have on today's episode Kass and Mike Lazerow. Welcome. Thank you for joining. I'm so excited for you guys to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
I'm going to go through and thank you. Obviously, you know, we have history. I've known you guys for a long time. Here's just a quick resume on these guys. It's pretty incredible. Most notably, we're going to be talking today about their upcoming book, Shoveling Shit. It's a love story about the entrepreneur's messy path to success. Mike and Kass live in New York and the Hudson Valley and have 3 grown children, Miles, Cole, and Vivian, and 2 rescue dogs, Cece and Gizmo. Did I say Cece and Gizmo correctly?
That's right.
They have founded 8 companies. They have 100 plus startup investments. The list of companies is incredible. Facebook, Twitter, Square, Pinterest, Instacart, Braze, Casper, Flipboard, Scopely, which was acquired in 2023 for about $5 billion. Is that about right?
That is exactly right.
Cool. Most notably, and how I've been following these guys, in June of 2012, Buddy Media was sold to Salesforce for $745 million. Mike was the chairman and CEO. Kass was the COO. And Mike, as I mentioned to you, one of my favorite all-time movies, like of all time on YouTube, is when you announced the acquisition with your video on that old school like iPad where you're kind of scrolling through, and the video is called "A New Beginning Is Fear Holding You Back." So welcome. Thank you for being here. Let's start with a little bit of a layup question. What inspired you guys to write this book?
I think, we had some more bandwidth. Our youngest is Vivian, and she is going to college next year. So we're going to be empty nesters. And it felt like we could start saying yes more this past year to doing more. And since we love helping entrepreneurs, and we absolutely love entrepreneurs, it felt like the right thing to do to get this book down, to give back to this amazing community. And the world needs more entrepreneurs. So this is what we're doing.
Very, very cool. You talk about in your book about the imbalanced life and the scars and the gains to prove it. And I watched your South by Southwest talk of this year. What I didn't know, Mike, is that Google offered you $100 million more than Mark Benioff and Salesforce. So what, and by the way, most entrepreneurs would be like, I'm going to take the higher deal and make more money and stuff. You guys didn't do that. So what was it that went into this decision that you said, okay, let's do this?
Yeah, so it wasn't a philanthropic thing. It wasn't an ethical thing. We're capitalists, and when you're running a company and when you're running a board, I was, running the Buddy Media board, you have fiduciary obligations to all shareholders. And, there was just in the air, we were going to sell the business. We could just feel it. We had inbound interest from not only Salesforce and Google, but also Microsoft and Yahoo. And at this point, I was just saying, listen, if you're interested, just put your best offer forward. We'd love to work with you. We weren't selling the company. There were other companies interested in buying it, which is very different dynamics as an entrepreneur. If you're selling the business, you have a banker, you're kind of saying, buy me, buy me. But if you're selling it, if others are buying it, you're basically just building a relationship and say, hey, if you want it, then, let us know what that means. And so Google put in an offer that was $100 million more. I would later hear that they're willing to go up significantly off of that because they really wanted this because we were the marketing backbone for a lot of Facebook's biggest clients. They were getting into
Advertisers,
social media, and they could take these social budgets and also run them on what at the time was their social network, Google Plus, which didn't exactly work out, as we all know today.
Yeah, that's right.
It was also a time that Google was every acquisition was going through Washington, taking over a year to get done because they had such a huge market share in marketing. Anything that touched the marketing stack was, at least the Department of Justice was very wary of Google buying it. Whereas Salesforce had the Service Cloud, the Sales Cloud, as you know, I mean, our time didn't overlap at Salesforce, but I think you know the history, and
Yeah,
they
of
didn't
course.
have any marketing. So it was basically, do we want 100 million more and wait a year, year and a half, 2 years to get our money, at which time the company has some major risks. Biggest risk was if Facebook changed their algorithm or turned us off because we were about to be owned by Google, the
Right.
business could potentially have imploded. And so
Oh,
we
and that
made the
could have completely
decision.
that could have completely backfired.
Yeah. And so, bird in the hand is great. I love Mark Benioff. I still do. The fit was great. And at a certain point, you have to optimize for more than just the headline number. And so we found a great partner in Salesforce, had a great 4 years there personally. Many of our people are still there. It's just an awesome company.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I have, as you probably know, I have about 6 years working at Salesforce in different roles. And I worked in the marketing cloud division, and got to see firsthand how Buddy was core to to building that out. I want to get back to the book. When did you guys decide let's share our story? And I want to go back to that, and then I want to kind of cover a couple of key areas inside of the book, because I've taken a glance on it, and obviously this is by the time this podcast comes out, it will be available on the to the world. So when did you let's start with you, Kass. When did you start kind of playing around with this book and start playing around with concepts? And by the way, what I love about it is that each of you give your own account and your own voice. Even though you guys are a team, I like how each of you kind of lean in and share your own point of view on things. So it's just brilliant. It's really well written. So let's just start with that, the book, and we'll go from there.
Thanks for saying that. We definitely wanted to have our unique voices because I think everybody who knows us knows that we're very different. So I had, over the last, I would say 15, 20 years, kept like a memo, those notes, digital notes that you can keep on your computer, that were all the lessons that I would keep telling all the entrepreneurs that we meet, that need help, that we invest in. And I had those, I had probably had, I don't know, 40 of them already. So when we decided to write the book, I started to outline and kind of group them together and then see like what would be a chapter. And I also had kept all these phrases that Mike and I would say over the years, like, the first 4 letters in culture is cult. And, do the job you have and do the job you want. So there was a lot of themes that we got out really quickly. And at the end of the day, once we got our flow, I would say it only took us about 3 months to write.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Only 3 months. So there's, the foreword is written by Gary Vaynerchuk, which I was unaware of this, but he actually started his whole venture at your offices, correct?
Yeah, he showed up and he'd worked for his dad his whole life, really, since he was 13. He was 34 years old, and he'd never made more than $100,000 a year, even though, which is, a lot of money, but even though he'd grown his dad's wine business and now liquor business from basically 6 million a year to close to 80 million off the back of Wine Library TV, which was one of the first social media shows on YouTube. And so I knew of his show, but he had no success in business, from an equity standpoint. So he showed up. He's like, listen, I have an idea for an agency. The agency is going to help companies market the way I have marketed at Wine Library and my, family company. And can I use your conference room? And we said, yeah, you could use it. What, for a meeting? He's like, no, for my office. And so I immediately said yes, because that's what I do. I just say yes to crazy things, even though we were giving away 33% of our office space for free.
Hmm.
But I said, you got to talk to this broad over here, Cass. She is the operator. And, Cass, you could talk about what happened from there.
Well, it's hard to say no to Gary. He has this infectious enthusiasm and persuasive banter that he'll use on you. And before you know it, you're saying yes to like anything. And I saw that Mike really wanted to be generous. And that's kind of one of our core values is generosity. And so we did it. And as a result, we got a firsthand seat, close up to him building this empire with his brother, which is pretty incredible to watch. And he has fun doing it. That's the other thing that, people always ask me, what's Gary like in real life? No, he has fun. He laughs. He enjoys himself. And it fit really well with the culture we were building at Buddy Media.
That's incredible. I want to talk a little bit about kind of building culture and within that, Cass, community and giving back. As we all share one of our near and dear friends, David Honig.
Yeah.
Who was on a previous. He's just an incredible human being. He's been a very close friend for many, many years. He was obviously on a previous episode. He talked a lot about you, and we actually covered you in that episode, which is how I reached out to you guys for this. And he always talked about how you guys did many events, brought the team together. The whole culture of giving back to the community is incredible. Not necessarily at one company, but how do you bring that type of culture and community into the companies that you serve, companies that you invest in? Tell me a little bit more about kind of your mantra or your, how you look at those types of areas in working with teams.
So I think there's a formula to building culture in a positive cult. And I think it begins with the leaders and the leadership team having radical transparency. I think that's the first step. So you always give the employees, not just investors and the board, but the employees, and you actually act as if they are part of your board, all of the information, the good, the bad, the ugly, the financial information, which most people thought we were crazy to do. And I think that really helps. That's the first part of the glue recipe. And the second and third part are obviously you have to have bonding activities that allow people to see each other in different lights so that you can mix different departments and things. And that's just bare minimum. Everybody should be doing this. We believe it should be happening in person. So we often, right now, we're really trying to persuade all of our companies and the leadership to do road shows and to go to the different hubs, especially when these companies are mostly remote. It's important for people to see each other face to face, understand mannerisms, body, read affect of a person, because it really goes a long way in developing a relationship. And then the third part, which I don't think I realized it back then. But when you create a cause, right, like a mission-driven cause that is bigger than the company, so you can bring people together and say, look, hey, we're behind this, and here's the reason why, and you lead by example, and if you can gather people to get around it, it really becomes the long-lasting glue, because people start to feel good. They're doing good and doing well together, and it just became like a perfect formula.
That's amazing. I think service in general is such a rewarding element to life. And, I started this podcast because I wanted to give back and provide a service back to folks. It wasn't about getting Instagram followers or YouTube subscribers. It was nothing about that. It was about, I wanted to work a sobriety program that was good for me. And I felt like tapping into thought leaders and entrepreneurs, serial entrepreneurs like yourselves, is a good way to give back. And if you just glean like one thing from any of these episodes, you know, that's a win, right?
Yeah.
I think what I love about both of you is that you literally like you've always checked your ego, like you know, back way back when. You never bring that to anything. It's your true sense of self, and I think that's one of your many superpowers.
Well, that's
We
very kind
appreciate
of
it.
you. Yeah, that's very kind
It's
of you to
a,
say.
you know, ego is an interesting thing because, we've heard that again and again that you guys, don't have an ego or you check your ego. At the end of the day, I think we have a very big ego. And every entrepreneur who starts out, anyone who does anything, including you with the podcast, you're basically signing up to fail in public. And
Absolutely.
it takes someone who's a little wacky and who really believes in themselves to start out, right? To not hide behind a job or hide behind a desk or, and people are like, "Oh, why are you working so hard? You guys have made all this money." Da, 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 da. It's like, well, A, it's what we do. We have
Sure.
beginner's mind and it's what keeps us going. And so I think the key for entrepreneurs, they got to be able to hold their ego, which is important, but also in the other hand, hold empathy and be able to listen and realize that, no matter how much success you had, you don't know everything and you have to continue to learn and grow.
I totally agree with that, and that's how I live my life, Mike and Cass. I think if you
Yeah.
can leave, I think if you can go into any situation knowing that you're going to make mistakes, knowing that you may fail, um, it doesn't matter because you're going to learn something from it, right? I don't know where this podcast is going to go. I only knew that this was something that I wanted to do, you know, as a way to connect with others in very unique ways. I will say that like I now reach out to folks like that don't even know me from Adam, and
Yeah.
I send them a quick blurb on what I'm doing. They're like, "Oh, I'll totally do it."
That's
Whereas,
Of
like,
awesome.
course.
you know, and it's I think because you know folks like to tell their story, and so no, this is great. Um, I I would love to kind of dive in a little bit more about your each unique, you know, superpower. You know, Mike, you're obviously, I would say, in my years of experience, you know, getting to know your persona, you're the idea guy, you're the creative guy. You know, you throw a lot of ideas at the wall and see whatever sticks, right? Cass, you're the operator. You keep, you know, you keep. Everything centered. I assume you probably keep Mike centered a lot of the times as well. Is that a fair kind of you know assessment? What are and beyond that, what would you say each of your superpowers are? And then Mike, I'd like you to describe a superpower in Cass, and Cass the same for Mike.
I definitely think you're right. You're dead on. Like we don't have overlapping skills, but we have overlapping ethics, like work ethic and belief system. And that really helps being partners in business, obviously, and partners in life. So we divide ourselves by, like, you know, like you said, visionary versus the operator. I would say a superpower of Mike's that I'm always amazed by is his ability to consume a ton of information on a daily basis and make sense of it and then turn it into some vision of how those things that he's read can impact the future.
Mm,
I can't read and consume things like he can. And I think a lot of visionaries can.
So
okay.
I think you nailed it. I'm definitely more creative, more the visionary. I can sell. I actually had to get on stages, so I can now like speak publicly. Cass is great at it, but she never had to do it. And so I was more external. Cass was more internal. Everyone has huge strengths and also huge weaknesses. And my biggest weaknesses are on the organizational side, on the focus side. I've had to really work on how do I focus. Having a partner like Cass has really helped me there. And when I look at Cass, she has so many strengths. Her biggest strength by far is her ability to multitask 1,000 things. So she thinks in spreadsheets, she thinks in to-do lists, nothing falls through the crack. And I mean nothing. I mean, we have two very different businesses right now, a VC business, a private equity business. We're doing the book, which we're really excited about giving back. We have two graduations. We're hosting pre-prom. Like from a imbalanced life standpoint, she manages so much stuff. I sell a few things. I'm creating some content. I look at my plate and I'm like, what am I doing? And so, any
That's amazing.
partnership that, you have different skills, as Cass said, and then you think through, like, do you have a shared vision? Do you have shared values? And the vision is like, how hard do we want to work? What's the company going to do? And then it's all about communication. So you have to get the elephant in the room. You have to talk about the hard stuff. You have to be able to take feedback and give feedback in an empathetic way. And
Absolutely.
that relationship is a really difficult one, the co-founder relationship.
Do you guys come as a package deal on all of your investments? Like, do you guys require if somebody says like, yeah, well, we just need like the creative side and, not saying like we just need Mike or we just need Cass. Do you guys basically say it's both of us or nothing?
Kind of. I mean, Mike sits on a lot of the boards. And one of the things I found over the years is if I sit on the boards, I can't really get in there and help the founders. And, my strength, one of my strength is getting people to talk to me and really talk about their challenges. And that could be anything from a personal challenge to like whatever's happening in the company. So I think we don't force people to work with us. I mean, Mike always says it, like, there's no like, you got to take us in our investment and you have to work with us. We're here if entrepreneurs need it. And we have come up with a good formula for, Mike really helps out on the financial side, fundraising side, vision, product. And I can help out on the operations, marketing, and kind of allowing entrepreneurs to vent, right? It's lonely at the top, as they say.
Sure is. Yeah.
Yeah.
In our last couple of minutes together, I have a couple of questions. One is about balance. It's a hard thing. It doesn't matter whether you're, working for a company or you're starting a company or investing in a company. How do you both find balance in your lives? I'm curious what that superpower is around that. And then I have one last question. That's a little bit of a curveball, but I'm going to save that for last. So let's talk a little bit about balance.
Yeah. So, there is no balance. And if you want to do anything great, you can only do a few things at a time. You could do anything, you just can't do everything, right? And so this book that we wrote really is designed not only to revolutionize how you approach entrepreneurship in your business and growing whatever you're trying to grow, but we're pulling back the curtain on these real unfiltered lessons about how to create a life that is worth living, right? Like, what's the purpose of success if you're miserable? And a lot of our time as entrepreneurs, especially early on, we were miserable. We didn't prioritize health. We didn't prioritize relationships. We didn't prioritize even our kids. And so we now have strategies to build and scale a successful life in addition to a successful business. For example, we always recommend that entrepreneurs do date nights, whether you're married, whether you're dating, whether you're single. Invest time in relationships that matter or in finding relationships that matter, right? So for us, it was every Wednesday and Saturday night. When we could afford it, we had a standing babysitter, and these were sacred nights. Sometimes we didn't leave our apartment in New York City. Sometimes we just went to dinner, sometimes a Broadway show. Sometimes we just sit and cry about how miserable our life is and how much work we have and how people are quitting and clients want to leave. And, so it's hard. But if you don't prioritize the things that matter, they will decay and you will find yourself miserable, as we did along the way. And so that's really, at the end of the day, that is what we're adding to this kind of great long line of books about entrepreneurship. It's not what you find in 0 to 1. It's not what you find in any of the startup books. It's basically like, here's how to not lose your soul while you're building your business 28 hours a day.
Yeah, I just interviewed a guy who is on a previous podcast named John Hunter, and he wrote this LinkedIn post that basically talked about I traveled 400,000 miles on a plane every year, and I was dead at 50, and I had lost touch with my family, and my wife was a widow, or my marriage was on the rocks. And I think a lot of folks struggle in the world to find balance and to find like what's that area of happiness where you can have a career, but you can also have kind of the things that are most important. That's your family, and that's your kids, and that's your life, right? I personally don't see like my professional career as like the defining element of who I am. The defining element of who I am is a husband. I'm almost married for 22 years in a few days from now, with my wife for 26 years.
Congrats.
Thank you. A father. My son is 19. He's a left-handed pitcher for the University of Oregon, and which is number 4 in the country right now. So like,
it's amazing.
And he's happy. And then I have a daughter who's 15, who's happy. And I'm working a sobriety program. Like those for me are the most important elements of like who I am. Just because I have a job or just because I do something, like, that those are table stakes.
Yeah, amen.
Agreed.
That's why we're like, any money we make on this book's going to Cycle for Survival. So,
Oh, cool. Can
you know,
you tell me a little bit about that real quick?
yes, we were the first corporate team for Cycle for Survival, indoor cycling fundraiser for cancer research.
Okay.
Fast forward, over half of the funds raised every year come from corporate teams. Over $35 million raised this year, $400 million raised total. 100% goes to cancer research. A big part of how we built culture and how we build meaning is to really attack problems that need solving as hard as we attack companies. And so that's something we've been involved with for 18 years. We've been leaders. We just did the New York Tech Startup Ride this past February. Number 2 will be next year, 2026. And it just gives us a lot of meaning. And if we can, at the end of the day, look back and say we were a tiny part of curing cancer, that is a legacy that we will be proud of.
That's terrific. All right, I want to end with a quote, and then we'll go ahead and wrap. In your video, Mike, that you announced the acquisition of Buddy Media to Salesforce, which you sold for $745 million, if that reads correctly. The quote is, "The enemy is fear. We think it is hate, but it is fear," which I completely agree with. What's your interpretation of what that means?
Fear is an emotion that causes us to do awful things. And everything we've done to get in trouble in life has been caused by our decisions and not competitors, outside people, third parties, companies. And so, and that stuff about kind of what got us in trouble is kind of not focusing or not paying attention to stuff or just making bad decisions. And a lot of those decisions were fear-based. What will our parents think? What will our friends think? We raised money because of this. How can we pivot now after we just kind of told them we're doing this, right? And so fear it's always there. It never leaves. And I think what we've realized is not how do you get rid of fear, but how do you jump with the fear? So you're never going to get me to not be scared of sharks. I do go in the ocean, right?
Sure.
I'm a little scared, but I'm scared of sharks. So it's this idea that like, if you can make sure that the fear doesn't lead to such crippling doubt and uncertainty and second guessing and decisions that you're just trying to avoid the imaginary boogeyman, that's really what I was talking about with kind of presenting that quote.
That's amazing. Well, I will say that, from a sobriety perspective, there's obviously the 12 steps to AA. And in step 6 and 7, you basically write down all of your character defects. One of my character defects is fear. There's always, for every word that you describe, what fears that you have, whether it's guilt, shame, defensiveness or what have you, there's always kind of a positive side to that. So the point is like, how do you spin and think about when you're faced with a challenging situation? How do you look at that character defect and think about what the positive opposite of that is? And that's frankly how I try and live my life now. And it sounds like that's something that you guys do every single day.
Yeah, it's a good way to put it.
Thank you for being here, Kass and Mike. Just to let everybody know, by the time this comes out, Shoveling Shit, a love story, Entrepreneur's Messy Path to Success will be out. I think this is going to come out in around the 4th or the 5th of June when this does come out. So congratulations on this book. Congratulations on your career. I'm so glad that I was able to spend time with you and to get to know you both. I'm humbled and I'm grateful. And before we say goodbye, I just want to let everybody know that are watching, getting sober is not something that you can do by yourself. It is a very lonely process. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay not to be okay. And, if it's something that you need to do, ask a friend, ask your best friend, ask your loved one, your spouse, your husband, your wife, and do something about it. But, the more that you sit in it, the harder it is, and you can't do it alone. So, this podcast serves as a resource to everybody. It's not, a place where you go to get sober. There's a lot of things out there like going to AA meetings and things like that. So I always kind of start or end the podcast with this. But Mike and Kass, thank you so much for being here. I adore you both. Any last parting thoughts before we go ahead and sign off?
No, just thank you so much, and appreciate you giving all these shout outs to us and our book coming out, and, appreciate you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right, y'all. We're going to sign off. Thanks, everybody. Talk soon.
Sometimes I feel like I want to fly without no wings. I elevate inside my mind, and sometimes